Ryan had been harboring feelings for Taehyung for what felt like an eternity. She had watched from afar as he moved through the halls with an air of indifference. His cold demeanor sending shivers down her spine, but despite his icy exterior, Ryan couldn't help but feel drawn to him, captivated by the mystery that surrounded him. Finally, after weeks of building up her courage, Ryan decided that she couldn't keep her feelings bottled up any longer. She took a deep breath and approached Taehyung as he stood alone by his locker, his expression unreadable. Taehyung, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I I have something I need to tell you. Taehyung raised an eyebrow, looking at her with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. What is it? He asked, his voice devoid of emotions. Ryan took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was about to come. I I like you, Taehyung, she confessed, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, Taehyung's expression softened, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. But it was quickly replaced by a cold mask of indifference as he looked at her with a steely gaze. I'm sorry, Ryan, he said, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. But I don't feel the same way. Ryan felt her heart drop to the pit of her stomach, a wave of rejection washing over her. She had prepared herself for the possibility of rejection, but nothing could have prepared her for the coldness in Taehyung's tone. I I understand, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. She could feel tears pricking at her corners of eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of him. Taehyung simply nodded, his gaze flickering away from hers as if he couldn't bear to look at her any longer. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Vian standing there alone with her shattered heart. As she watched him disappear into the crowd, Ryan felt a wave of emotions crashing over her. Hurt, rejection, and humiliation mingled together in a tumultuous storm inside her chest. She felt as if the ground had been ripped out from her feet, leaving her adrift in a sea of pain. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she turned and fled down the hallway. Desperate to escape the prying eyes of her classmates, she sought refuge in the empty girls' bathroom. Collapsing against the cold tile floor as sobs wrecked her body. Why had she even bothered confessing her feelings to someone like Taehyung? She knew he was cold and distant, but she had hoped that maybe, just maybe, there was a spark of warmth hidden beneath his icy exterior. But now she knew the truth. He was as cold and heartless as everyone said he was. Vian wiped away her tears and took a shaky breath, trying to compose herself. She knew she had to put on a brave face and pretend that Taehyung's rejection didn't hurt as much as it did. But deep down, she knew that the wound he had inflicted on her heart would take time to heal. As she stood up and splashed water on her face, trying to wash away the evidence of her tears. Vian made a silent vow to herself she would move on from Taehyung no matter how much it hurt. She deserved someone who would appreciate her kindness, not someone who would crush her heart without a single thought. And with that resolve in her heart, Vian stepped out of the bathroom and back into harsh reality of high school life. She may have been rejected by Taehyung, but she refused to let his coldness define her worth. In the evening, Vian's heart felt heavy as she trudged back home from school, the weight of Taehyung's rejection still fresh in her mind. She knew she needed to clear her head, to find some solace in the beauty of nature. So, without a second thought, she changed into more comfortable clothes and made her way to the beach. Hoping that the calming sound of the waves would soothe her troubled soul. As she approached the beach, the sun was beginning its descent towards the horizon. Casting a warm glow over the sand and sea. Ryan found a secluded spot near the water's edge and sat down, gazing out at the breathtaking sight before her. The colors of the sky painted a picture of serenity, a stark contrast to the turmoil in her heart. But as Ryan scanned the beach, her eyes landed on a familiar figure sitting alone on a nearby rock. It was Taehyung, his usually bright eyes downcast and his shoulders slumped in defeat. Ryan's heart clenched at the sight of him looking so desolate. She watched as he took a small cupcake out of his bag, a solitary celebration in the midst of his loneliness. He sang himself the birthday song. Ryan couldn't bear to see him like that. Knowing that he had pushed her away earlier that day, despite everything, her heart ached for him. For the pain he must be feeling deep inside. Without hesitation, Ryan made up her mind. She couldn't leave Taehyung alone on his birthday. No matter how cold and distant he had been towards her, gathering her resolve, she stood up and walked over to the nearest bakery and got him a cake and a present. But as she reached the beach, he was gone. Ryan called her friend, who was also the head girl of their school, and asked to arrange Taehyung's address. A few minutes later, her phone beeped. It was her friend's message. She got Taehyung's address. As she reached his apartment, she saw him standing in front of his door. Taehyung, Ryan called out softly, causing him to turn around and look up in surprise. His eyes widened at the sight of her standing before him, a mix of confusion and weariness in his gaze. Vine took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she was about to do. Happy birthday, she said, lifting up the paper bag that had a cake and a present for him. Taehyung's expression softened slightly at her words, a flicker of emotion crossing his features. Wyan, what are you doing here? Who gave you my address? He asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Wyan offered him a small smile, hoping to convey her sincerity. You'll get a chance to interview me later, but for now, can we please cut the cake? She said, reaching out into her bag and pulling out a beautifully decorated cake. Taehyung's eyes widened in surprise as he looked at the cake in Wyan's hands. He seemed at a loss of words, his emotions swirling inside him like a storm. Wyan couldn't see the conflict in his eyes. The war between his walls of defense and the vulnerability that lay beneath. After a moment of silence, Taeyong finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you, Wyan. I didn't expect this. Let's go inside, he said, his tone filled with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Ryan's heart swelled with hope as she watched Taehyung's guarded figure crack ever so slightly. She knew that this was just a small step towards breaking down the walls he had built around himself, but it was a start. They went inside his apartment. Ryan never expected it to be this clean and beautiful. He asked her to sit on the sofa and place the cake on the table while he gets the knife. Together they sat on the sofa. She sang him the birthday song as he took a piece of cake and fed Ryan, and she did the same. Both shared stories and laughter as they enjoyed the simple pleasure of each other's company. Ryan felt a sense of warmth and connection blossoming between them, a glimmer of hope that maybe But just maybe there was a chance for something more. He opened the present she bought and it was a book. I'm sorry, but this is all I got, as I didn't had much time. No, this is perfect. I love reading books. Taehyung cut her off, his smile bright and genuine. This is the first time in years someone has given me something. Thank you, YN. He smiled at her, making her heart beat faster, but it soon faded as he said, YN, I'm sorry for today. It's just, I'm so used to being alone that I've built walls around my heart, which are hard to break. And I just, YN placed her hand on his, gently. Taehyung, it's okay. It's not necessary for you to accept my feelings. It's not your fault, yeah? I just want to be friends with you. I know it's not easy for you, but for once, trust me. They both stared at each other's eyes for a few minutes in silence. Taehyung nodded his head, breaking the eye contact. As the evening drew to a close, Taehyung walked Ryan back to her apartment, their steps light and easy in each other's presence. She handed him a letter with a smile, watching as his eyes lit up with genuine happiness. What is this? He asked. Nothing, just some appreciation for my friend. Thank you for this, Ryan. Taehyung said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. I, I appreciate it more than you know. Ryan simply nodded, his heart brimming with newfound courage and determination. She knew that breaking down Taehyung's walls would take time and patience, but she was willing to take that journey with him one step at a time. And as she bid him good night and turned to leave, Ryan couldn't help but feel a spark of hope ignite within her. She turned towards him and leaned in, giving a peck on his cheeks before running inside after saying happy birthday one last time. Taehyung stood there stunned, his face bright red. He looked down, placing his hand on the cheek while chuckling lightly. Silly girl. Sometimes we judge a person too early without even knowing their side of the story. So it's important to put yourself in someone else's shoes before coming to a conclusion. With that note, the end.